Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Cavirin's May webinar, Finding Out Your Cybersecurity Posture Doesn't Take a Genius. We'll be starting in about 1 minute, so please stand by. Welcome everyone to the Cavirin May webinar, Finding Out Your Cybersecurity Posture Doesn't Take a Genius. We still have some people coming online, so please stand by for about 30 more seconds. Welcome everyone to Cavirin's May webinar, Finding Out Your Cybersecurity Posture Doesn't Take a Genius. Our presenter today is Mukul Kumar, who's our CISO and VP of Cyber Practice at Cavirin. He has over 18 years of IT and security experience, and his background really speaks for itself in terms of real-life operational background, places including Altera and Intel. And if you look earlier on, lots of great domain expertise at places like McKinsey and Microsoft. So Mukul, welcome to the webinar this morning.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the introduction, Dave, and thank you to everyone for joining us on this webinar. As the topic suggests, we are here to discuss, share our survey results from the companies and what we have learned in the field, what it takes to understand the cyber posture, and what are our recommendations to tackle this problem. So before we jump onto the slide, I'd like to set the stage by stating the business reality, and I don't think anybody would disagree with that. We live in a time where every business is connected to the internet. That's the key umbrella statement that I would make, and is relying on a digital technology to make a difference. Right? The only thing that differentiates one business to another is their capability and functionality to provide capabilities to their customers, and the organizations which provide these functionality faster, I think, would lead the market and ultimately would increase the business value for their customer base and for their business. So in my mind, speed of the execution is the path to achieve the business goals that we are looking at. And obviously, the answer for achieving this requires the speed, which ultimately leads us towards leveraging cloud. Now, cloud certainly has brought innovation, execution of speed, but at the same time has also introduced massive complexity and visibility issues, not to forget that. At any given point in time, many organizations would say, we don't know how many microservices are running and how many different zones it's running. And that's a big problem. That's a big problem for many other organizations. And if I may add a little more color to that, organizations that are leveraging hybrid cloud model, simply because this couple of the workloads are not suited for cloud or other business factors like DR, multi-vendor strategy, or even for the business continuity. I remember in the past, the first thing that when we started looking at cloud 5 years ago, the first thing that everybody was asking, what happens if the company goes out of the business? So that led us towards the hybrid cloud model, but that increased the complexity. So that said, we'll walk you through our survey results, what we have learned so far, and we will end the conversation with some recommendation. We'll talk about Cavirin, what we are doing to help this situation. So let's move on to the next slide. So what we learned from our key customer pain points, that 81% of the enterprises have already adopted the multi-cloud strategy. And by the way, these are the combination of results from survey from RightScale Cloud Report and Cavirin Hybrid Cloud Security Survey that we did with our customers, and also ESG Hybrid Cloud Survey. These are the numbers that we have combined together from these 3 surveys. And the message here is 81%, like we talked about, enterprises have already adopted multi-cloud strategy. 77% think security is a big barrier for adoption of cloud. And 69% thinks about the visibility, like we talked about. It's like on-prem, multi-cloud. That's the biggest concern that's a pain point, I would say. That's a pain point for them. And on top of it, not to mention, we heard about the serious skill shortage that leads us up to that discussion about around 3.5 million unfilled job security roles would be coming up in recent years. I was just listening to one of the podcasts from somebody mentioning about Baltimore and Washington region itself. There are 43,000 security jobs still open that to be filled in by the security expertise. So that's a big problem. And so let's deep dive into a little bit what we are doing, what we have learned so far. This slide it talks about supporting the reason of like what's the adoption, what we talked about multi-cloud, not what we learned from our vendors, which is on-prem, they are running on VMs, they're on-prem with private cloud, colos, they have AWS, Azure, GCP. Couple of vendors we talked about, they are using specific cloud like Oracle and SAP to fit their workload. So this just talks about the problem statement that we highlighted in slide 2. This slide talks about when we double-click, like in what ways of these, when we double-click on the problem about the hybrid cloud, what has changed because of adoption of the hybrid cloud architecture? And the foremost thing that comes up to everyone's mind, and the problem is the increased complexity, because now half of the workloads are running on-prem physical. Some of the workloads have been virtualized on-prem. Some of the workloads have been moved into a specific cloud that fits into the application realm, like SAP or Oracle. But the other problem was the visibility, because at any given point in time, not many organizations doesn't have a cohesive and comprehensive view of their landscape, and that's a big problem. That's a big challenge. When you don't even know what you're trying to protect, yeah, you're scratching your head like, where do I even go to take this security guidelines, to implement these guidelines? So this is one of the slides which double-clicked on the problem statement. and what increased, what the level of complexity increased from adoption of hybrid cloud. This slide talks about just emphasizing the concern, what we heard from last 2 or 3 slides. The organizations are concerned about cloud security because of, again, highlighting the fact of the increased complexity, increased data protection on those hybrid cloud model, and the visibility is a big major portion of it. Now, this slide validates the survey results. This is the combined survey results of what we learned so far. 56% of the organization says staff expertise is a problem because we have siloed organizations. Security was looking at traditional security model. Our infrastructure team, which is divided into the application and network and databases, they are siloed. They don't talk to each other, and they are not able to combine forces to take over the cloud adoption model. So staff expertise is a big problem, and cross-training is also a big problem among that team. 41% of the company's organization talked about data privacy. They didn't want it to move to the clouds, but I have a different opinion there. That's my personal opinion. I think cloud model or a public cloud infrastructure is much more secure than an on-prem model that we talk about. But that's just my personal opinion towards that. 37% of the organization talked about lack of integration, and this is the reality of the situation with on-prem and cloud security technologies. On-prem in the traditional model, we had IPS, IDS, firewalls, ranging from endpoint detection technologies. So that whole model doesn't fit right into the cloud model itself. So now teams have to manage and maintain multiple technologies to even wrap their hands around the hybrid cloud model and on-prem. Then we asked the other question to our audiences, to our customers about, so how are you dealing with this hybrid cloud security management tools? What do you currently use? Like I talked about, it's ranging from cloud workload protection platforms. That's one aspect to look at it. Existing on-prem, like I mentioned, IPS, IDS, the firewalls, that's already there. They're also using CASB solution as a cloud broker. Obviously, SIM is the log correlation on-prem. It's a combination for hybrid cloud as well. So it's all ranging from different tools and different platforms, how the teams are dealing with this problem. Then we further drill down into what's the biggest weakness pertaining to the individuals that we talked about, the responsibility of the hybrid cloud strategy. The biggest thing that came up from this survey, everybody agreed on, and the survey results shows this very clearly, general knowledge of the cybersecurity threats in a hybrid cloud model itself, because the workforce, the teams are not well about the nuts and bolts of different clouds. Now we are talking about on-prem. We added clouds like AWS, Azure, even GCP. All these cloud models are using the infrastructure a little differently. The APIs are different. Configuration parameters are different. So one of the common theme that we learned was the basic knowledge of operating these hybrid cloud altogether. The nuts and bolts of this hybrid cloud, that's really lagging in the field. The other one that's highlighted here as well, the lack of familiarity with the continuous integration. Some of the cloud vendors are way ahead providing the API integration. Some are still catching up onto that. But that creates a big challenge for lack of familiarity, because now the same workforce team that was taking care of the on-prem infrastructure has to learn and to be familiar with the continuous integration part. The other interesting aspect, which was not a surprising factor for me at least, coming from the operational background, working relationship between the IT operations, DevOps, and cybersecurity team. Cybersecurity is usually seen as a policing function, where DevOps thinks as a speed function. IT operations takes care of everything else in general. So the working relationship is a big barrier for this kind of an adoption of this. It's like what we call it in our terms, it's people, process, and technology all combined together. It's a hybrid cloud. What we talk to the customer when we tell them it's more of a mindset change rather than just a technology switch that we can think of. And it further goes down in understanding of the specific how cloud vendors provide the services, organizations share responsibility, where to stop, and what is the ownership on that. Because the cloud vendors are providing just the groundwork, like they're providing the infrastructure. And that's where their responsibility stops right there. What we build on the cloud model and a hybrid model, what we build the application on top of it, it's organization's responsibility to protect that, to detect any deviation in the changes that's happening. That's the organization's responsibility that's putting their infrastructure on that cloud. And again, a few of them came back with the cloud security skills that's already highlighted. That I'll bundle that into the general knowledge of the cybersecurity threats in the cloud framework, because yeah, that's a big challenge and that's a big problem there. The other question that we asked about, understand the span, how this public cloud or hybrid cloud model, when organizations are building this hybrid cloud model, who are the stakeholders? Who are the people, who are the users accessing this cloud infrastructure from an adoption perspective? But this talks about the simple annotation I can say, too many cooks in the kitchen. If you look at it, like how many people are touching this hybrid cloud model? First of all, it's already complex. The online data center, which was locked behind the door, that some admin had to go and badge in before they change any configuration. Now these things are already, these workloads, these configurations are already running in cloud. An administrator can change the config, modify the config from anywhere, practically sitting on a beach. But that boils down to the problem, like how many people have their hands in configuration and changing of this complex hybrid model already. So we learned about, of course, the full-time employees that are working on it. We get contractors, business partners, part-time employees. So just highlighting the complexity increased multiple-fold by having multiple parties involved into the configuration, maintenance, and manageability of this hybrid cloud. Now, customers and suppliers, I would say, yes, they need to be there, because this whole ecosystem is being derived and is being created for the customers and suppliers for adoption. But just to highlight the complexity that increases because of the number of teams, number of ownership that gets built into this hybrid cloud adoption model. Now, then we further asked this question to organizations that we are working with. So, how are you dealing with this whole situation of complexity, consolidation, speed, and all things together? What's the best way to deal with this? Many organizations have started thinking about the cloud security architects, the group that will sit within the organization, within the IT organization, that will bridge the gap between traditional IT operation, DevOps, and a little bit of security. But still, it's not well adopted in the industry as such yet, but I would say it's a right direction. It's a move in the right direction. Having somebody overlooking the security architecture for cloud adoption and multiple clouds and hybrid model, what needs to be done. So this is a good direction for many organizations. And if you closely look at the survey, I would say close to 60% of the organization has started adopting this cloud security architect group of architects to overlook the deployment in the hybrid cloud about this. Now, we wanted to further understand how and what are the groups that are involved in creating the policies, to-dos and not to-dos from the hybrid cloud security perspective. Of course, the security team is the biggest contributor onto this. The next comes the network team, because everything is driven and connected to network. Then comes the data center and infrastructure operations team. Below that, it's the DevOps team. If I pause for a second here, that creates a problem in my mind. That raises a question, not a problem, but raises a question in my mind. Why do you think DevOps team is not above the network and the data center infrastructure team all combined together? I think that's a very key aspect and point to understand the combination of network and data center team that needs to be translated. I would rather say in the top three, the security, networking, and the data center infrastructure team needs to be part of DevOps somehow, so that we don't have to rely on old mundane task of managing the firewall rules, patching the infrastructure every Tuesday when the patch comes out from Microsoft, or for the Linux infrastructure to wait to patch those systems. I think we should leverage DevOps and combine those top three teams into one bucket and leverage more of what I'll talk a little bit more about in my next slides, to combine all these forces together to come up with a DevSecOps team that will give much more flexibility and much more speed, much more agility to maintain the security posture in this hybrid cloud model. Further drilling down a little bit more about the level of involvement about the cybersecurity team, the typical security team in the hybrid cloud model, they are doing a partial portion of the whole defining of policies, evaluating the controls, but majority is heavily involved from the traditional cybersecurity team. Is heavily involved in this hybrid cloud model, which is a good thing. That's a good progression about to involve the security team before we even jump onto the hybrid cloud model. So this survey at least validates that thought process and line of question from our side. This slide, we practically validated the thought process that we are preaching it back to our customers and our organizations that we are dealing with. We turned the question a little bit different for them to understand, why do you think you have started leveraging DevSecOps? That's what I was referring to in previous slide. And interestingly, only few organizations, you can see with the numbers listed here, only 30% of the organizations said it allows us to improve our security posture. Because think about, from the DevSecOps is a combination of DevOps team, the security team, and the operations team. In the traditional model, DevOps team would just provision the infrastructure for the operations team or the application team to leverage it. The security team would do an audit once a month, once a quarter, based on the level of strength and availability, and the operations team would go and fix those things. But that's a very static model of operation. So many companies, many organizations have started realizing that as they are spanning into multiple hybrid cloud model, that static model of operation of security would not be a good fit, because by the time they come back to the remediation, it's almost 45 days into the pipeline since the DevOps team provisioned that infrastructure. So they have started combining all of them into one group and started leveraging a automated way through API integration, through Ansible, Chef, and Puppet. They configure their dev environment, learn what they are missing with the assessments that they are doing onto the hybrid environment, come back, put that into recipes, push that into the development environment. So it's a continuous cycle rather than a static operation from the security team. The other good thing, which I would like to see a higher number, but I think it's again it's a right direction. The organizations are moving towards the right direction, which talks about fostering the high level of collaboration, which is really important for the hybrid cloud adoption, I would say, and ultimately for the agility and speed for the business. It's also in many organizations, compliance and regulations are a big aspect for the business. So that also helps them to be compliant for the business and improves their efficiency as well. So that said, what we have learned so far, we would like to give some recommendation based on our what we have seen in the with our talking to our customers and learning from them. We put together a few of the recommendations for the audiences, but the first and the foremost thing I would say, operational hygiene comes at the top of the list. It's like even after years of discussion and debates, the attacks continues and even are escalating. Most companies, what we realize, don't fully understand the threat, and they are not always prepared as well as they might, right? And so we don't claim to have all the answers either, but hope that this recap of the problem and the pitfall that we are highlighting, that would help companies calibrate their security posture. So keeping that in mind, we come up with some recommendation here, which again, the operational hygiene comes at the top of the list. Operational hygiene, I mean to say no arbitrary code, no email, no web client. Think about your admin privilege management. Think about your change management that needs to happen, not to mention and the log management aspect of it, which is really important when something goes wrong so that you can go back and look at it, what actually happened. Role-based delegation, restricted physical and logical parameters. I mean, it's a broader scope for the operational hygiene that I'm highlighting here, but that's really important for every organization to understand. That operational hygiene is the first and foremost thing that every organization to look at. Then I want to highlight something that what we learned, and based on the slides that we have presented so far, leverage comprehensive security architecture. Given the complexity of the hybrid deployment model, the speed that the business is executing, a static security architecture would not be a fit now in this current model. That requires continuous monitoring, that requires a predicting of the deviation before it happens. And as soon as you predict the deviation on the workloads, on the accounts, on your microservices, it has to be somehow integrated with continuous response. That's what we call it with automation, with DevSecOps, meaning you monitor something, you found something wrong, that comes into the predicting bucket before it goes bad. As soon as you found that this is wrong, it needs to be in continuation through API hooks, in continuation with configuration management, needs to go through that DevSecOps pipeline as if it's more of a software development pipeline. Not to mention the implement effectiveness of governance. That's a key aspect. It's really required for the overall governance of the program itself. We should start looking at the security and the hybrid cloud model, everything combined together from a risk management framework rather than point-specific whack-a-mole scenario. I wanted to combine that with the security best practices and frameworks, like leverage what we already have in the industry, the best policy frameworks like CIS, NIST, leverage those governance and best practices and frameworks to implement that again into your comprehensive security architecture. And last but not the least, what we have learned and what we saw from the survey results, there is a big gap in the functional training programs from the organization. The cloud team are only aware of the cloud aspect of it, not necessarily they have the security background or they have not necessarily they understand the implication of choosing something based on the security architecture model. And same thing goes with the DevOps. What we have seen so far, only few organizations have started combining all these things together to come up with a DevSecOps mindset, the processes and technologies to support that. So that said, I'll jump onto a little bit about what Cavirin is doing, how we are trying to solve this problem, and how we are helping our customers, our other organizations in this model. I would say, I would say in one line, if I have to describe Cavirin, I would start saying, I would say that consider the FICO score of cybersecurity. So, and that's where the cyber posture intelligence comes into picture. That what we are trying to create a platform which provides actionable intelligence with a dashboard for the CISO dashboard and other stakeholders, because CISOs and other executive team members would look at the overall posture of the enterprise, overall posture of the hybrid footprint, what's going on, giving them a consolidation score about the health of their ecosystem. But there are multiple stakeholders in the ecosystem that wants to fix the problem. So we have combined the layers into that platform that gives the security posture intelligence and also provide the continuous risk visibility. We also have the compliance management frameworks across multiple hybrid cloud, ranging from a physical running on virtual, the containers, and moving towards the cloud about Azure, GCP, and AWS, and even towards the specific application cloud vendors like Oracle and SAP towards that. So let me go to the next theme. So what do we do? Okay. Yeah, this is just one of the snippet of our dashboard, which comes up with the score that I was talking about, the overall score, which comes up from, it's a combination, it's a mathematical algorithm that comes up from security and compliance, and below that you can see we are highlighting the scores from different cloud, different containers, and even on-prem. That gets combined together into the cyber posture score that's highlighted at the top. And how do we achieve this? How do we do this? It's a layered approach. We start with the monitoring, like we said. You don't know what to fix unless you know where things are placed, where things are running, how many microservices are running in cloud. So we bring that all together into one platform with the real-time monitoring. On top of it, we layer that with the configuration deviation, what we see. Along with that goes the vulnerability assessment part. That's the traditional model of security, but that's just one component of what we are doing. On top of it, we put control frameworks like CIS, NIST, all combined together. There are close to 80,000 technical controls that we run against the workloads and come back with the scoring methodologies, because all these technical controls have some weightage associated with the severity of it, and that drives this calculated number. Few more things that are coming up in future releases, that we are looking at the asset criticality, about which asset is more critical than the other, because the thought process there would be a kiosk system running on your front desk or your reception desk would not be as important as the domain controller or to your SAP infrastructure or something else. So that's coming in future releases. We're also incorporating the threat intelligence feed to make it much more sharper and much more effective for the organization to understand the scores what they're getting. That would be there's another aspect to this that we are trying to build that into the platform, which is more likelihood and the impact, because that's what ultimately drives the risk. What's the likelihood of the deviation that we see configuration and vulnerability that this specific asset would get compromised, that will lead to the impact, and that will drive the numbers at the top in the cyber posture dashboard. So we talked about the CISO dashboard. That's one aspect. You look under the screen towards the left. That gives you the prioritized overall score. Towards the right, you see the prioritized action item that needs to be fixed. What are the reasons why we are highlighting something as red? So that's a consolidated screen for somebody like CISOs and C-level executives who want to just see a combined, consolidated view of their entire hybrid landscape, which we are highlighting, that hybrid cloud workload and account security. Hybrid cloud workload, not many times when we present it to the audiences and to our customers and the teams that we work with, they have questions about the cloud accounts itself. So yes, we cover the cloud account and many services that goes along with the cloud account. And we also look at the hosts or the VMs or the workloads that gets created into the hybrid cloud model. Again, it's more of a continuous approach. Like I talked about, compliance is one aspect that we look at, along with industry frameworks and vulnerabilities and assessment related to it. Very strong, and we take pride in that, looking at the DevOps security automation. It's very actively being driven by an engineering team, the same team that I was talking about in the previous conversation, about how to integrate all these things into a continuous remediation pipeline. You find something is wrong, come up with the recipes to fix it, connect it to the development environment at least, to let it push off and make the changes on a continuous basis. So within 24 hours, you found something, you already fixed it, and it's already patched and done, rather than waiting for 45 days. When you find something, file a ticket to the operation team and then go ahead and fix it. Rather than doing that, it would be a continuous effort. Immediately, recipes are built, pushed out onto the automation pipeline, and get pushed back to the workload. Further highlighting the same aspect, we do a continuous monitoring. The slide is not. Continuous monitoring, based on what we learn, we predict what things can go wrong based on the frameworks, based on the vulnerabilities and the continuous compliance part. We provide the response capability in an automated fashion, ultimately protects the workload. And that completes the whole cycle of DevSecOps that we are talking about. And one more thing that I would like to mention here, looking at the logos and the containers and everything else that you're looking at, there are close to 22 or 23 operating systems that we look at and are compatible with. That was something that was really interesting and a strong point. We are in hybrid cloud model as well, VMware, AWS, Azure, GCP. So with that, I will close this presentation. We'll open it for any feedback or any questions. Dave?
Yeah, Mukul, thank you very much. And once again, the presentation is open to questions. Just please go on your viewer screen, the drop-down menu, questions from audience, and then type them in. While we're waiting for some questions, if you'd like to get additional information on the Cavirin solution or our cyber posture scoring, the CISO dashboard, please just go over to our website, www.cavirin.com, and you can also sign up for a 14-day trial. So one question came in, and Mukul, this is obviously for you. Given your past experience and further back in time on the operational side, how do you think some of these tools have evolved over the last number of years? And do you think, or would you have expected them to have evolved faster, to become more comprehensive? Is there a disappointment there? What what's your view on the pace of innovation in terms of what we're doing here?
That's a good question, and thank you for asking that. Yes, if I put myself into the shoes 5 years ago when I was running the operations, I would really be upset and unhappy with the vendors that they are not moving with the pace that technology and the whole ecosystem is moving. And one of the classic examples I would say is the antivirus thing. Now, the antivirus has been there for so many years, but still lot many vulnerabilities, lot many executables that gets downloaded by our users get missed by these antivirus vendors, which is running on almost every endpoint in an organization. So to answer that question, I would say yes, vendors should take the responsibility to innovate faster, again, going back to the same thought process, to be ahead of the curve about the market, the direction of the market that they are leading towards, because otherwise those technologies become obsolete and it becomes harder for the operational team to rip and replace them because they are so intertwined into the ecosystem. It creates another level of challenges to that. So yes, there is a level of disappointment, but I would leverage, I think, combined with the operational team, if we put pressure on the vendors to go into the right direction, I think, and asking the right questions and putting our requirements clearly to them, I think that would definitely help into that space. That's my observation, that's my thought process to solve that.
Okay, another question, and this is going back to some of the material you touched upon on DevSecOps. Given that the SecOps team is sometimes held as I want to say, a barrier to agile development that the DevOps people are most familiar with, what types of remaining barriers on the operational side, on the human side, on the technology side, what types of barriers are there to a true adoption of a DevSecOps paradigm within these organizations?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. I believe the first and the foremost thing that the organizations should start from the executive level sponsorship, because that's where, if the team at the exec level understand the implication and the requirement of the business, because many times what I have seen when I went back to my board, many times they didn't even realize what I was asking for. And I had to drill it down to the level to make them understand what was the requirement for. Once that was done, after that it was a cakewalk, to be really honest. Every senior exec in the organization, from the development team, the software team, rallied behind it, and that helped the execution. So that was the first step. The second step comes to the process. Define the process before anything gets pushed onto the production. The DevSecOps, the combined group that I'm talking about, has to go through that process. Then comes the execution and the training part. And those two are easy as you get the group from the exec sponsorship and the process in place. I think that would be the most logical way to achieve this.
Thank you, Mukul. And then last question, and this is sort of coming from left field. And I know you're snickering here. So, you have the cloud providers and the famous or the infamous shared responsibility model, where they have their responsibilities, the enterprise, the organization has their security responsibilities, but almost every week you read about a breach, you read about, records that have been compromised. Even, just a few days ago, and I read, you had a commentary on this parent spying application that left, credentials and even personal information wide open in the cloud. And this is probably due to the fact that, a lot of organizations, a lot of smaller companies moving services and data into the cloud don't totally understand this model. So the question is, do the public cloud providers have to do more? Is it a matter of education? Is it a matter of more secure services by the likes of AWS, Google, and Azure? What's your view on it?
So Yeah, that's a very good question, and thank you again for asking that. I think the cloud service provider has a limitation on when they provide these services because they're giving the landscape to build these services. They are providing the infrastructure to build the application on top of it. And if they don't have the if they don't cut off from the responsibility of providing that infrastructure, that becomes a slippery slope from a cloud service provider perspective, if you think about it, because they don't know how you're developing the application. They don't know what kind of libraries you are building, using. They don't know what kind of integration you are building, what's the business impact. They don't have that visibility into it. So I think asking us as a consumer of the cloud services, asking cloud service provider to have the shared responsibility above that layer, I don't think that model would be fruitful for either or neither for the cloud service provider nor for the consumer. But I agree to the part that the cloud service provider should provide more security control tools, more auditing tools, more bundled approach to do a security assessment for the services they are providing. A classic example is the S3 bucket. Amazon has started working on that very recently, and they have released related to that as well. But it's very point specific. Yeah, you create the S3 bucket. Now you have some option of scanning that and looking at it, what's going wrong. But that should have been done in the first place. So I agree to the part that cloud service providers should leverage their expertise and bring more security control tools to the ecosystem. But I don't believe that shared responsibility model will cross path between the adopters and the cloud service provider.
Okay, thank you very much, Mukul. And for those in the audience, we're just about out of time. Thank you very much again for your insight and perspectives today. Once again, the webinar itself will be recorded and posted on the BrightTalk platform within the next hour or so. And then please